One interesting thing about Skybound and the Energon universe is the fact that you never know what you're going to get. You know, basically, you never kind of expect something to go a certain way, and when it does, yeah, it's a nice surprise or a nice homage to, one incarnation or another. But sometimes it's like, an unexpected result, or an unexpected change, if you will. And one of the biggest changes as of right now, because a lot of people still question whether or not in story, whether this is legit or it's just a ruse. And that is the fact that one of the most popular villainesses from Hasbro's history of the big three, the big four, if you will. One of the most popular villainesses out of the big four, that being Transformers, My Little Pony, Gem, and of course G.I.JOE. One of the most popular iconic villainesses, out of all that, especially when it comes to G.I.JOE, the Baroness, well, in Skybound, the people behind the book, one of the writers at least, decided to kind of switch things up. And I found out about this switch up during a recent interview that Hasbro's channel, well, not channel, but their, it was on the Hasbro channel, but it was part of the HasLab, I guess you could say, presentation, interviews, whatever you want to call it, right? It was a video on the YouTube page. And I do apologize, I am tired, I did work today. But point I'm getting at is, I found out about this, switch when one of the writers for the book basically mentioned a poem that Major Blood, that's B-L-U-D-D, Major Blood, wrote about the Baroness, saying that she used to work for them, all tried and true, but now she works and fights for the red, white, and blue, or something like that. And the moment I heard that, I'm like, wait a minute, what? And then they had a book, one of the volume books, I think, in front of them, and it had a cover of all the Joe teammates together in a group shot, and one of those Joe teammates was the Baroness. And you're thinking to yourself, well, wait a minute, why? Why would they do this? Why would they make this change? And apparently this change happened, late last year in November. But why do this? Why do this? And a lot of folks feel, even back then and now, that the whole Baroness thing is a ruse. That eventually it's going to get revealed that she's a double agent for Cobra. And if that's true, then hey, it stays true to the Baroness's nature. Make herself look, or make herself and act as somebody else, gain the trust of, certain allies or potential teammates like the Joes, and then stab them in the back. That would be true to her nature. But the way the writer of the book made it sound, he made it sound like this Baroness change wasn't a ruse. That this Baroness change was, pretty much permanent as far as the Energon universe goes. And if that's true, if that is the case, ladies and gentlemen, then it is quite the surprise. It is quite the shocker. Heck, somebody, and again, I'm tired, I do apologize, but somebody through an AI vocalizing, for a, reading of the reading/review of some recent issues, basically showcased the issue, actually two issues, I should say, the recently two issues of G.I.JOE, where the Baroness and CoverGirl were pretty much captured, and basically pit against each other for Major Blood's amusement, because one of the trade paperbacks that collects all the stories that is out or will be coming out is called G.I.JOE Volume 2, Major Blood's Revenge. And, I look at this and I'm thinking, okay, what is going on here? Why would Major Blood have an issue with the Baroness? What did the Baroness do to basically irritate Major Blood. And what did she do to potentially turn against Cobra? It's like, what did Cobra do? What lines did they make, if you will, to make her basically turn and say, you know what, I'd rather be a Joe than be a Cobra. These are questions people want to know, and I'm going to find out eventually, because I plan to get some of the trade paperbacks with my first paycheck after I take care of a few things down the line. More important things. But point I'm getting at is the question, even people that haven't caught up yet to the Skybound stuff, sorry about that, but like I said, people look at that, and for those that haven't caught up to to the Skybound Energon universe, because there's so much to try to catch up on, it makes people wonder, like, what did she do that made her turn against Cobra? What did they do? Like, who did they align with? What made her realize, as I mentioned before, the phone rang there. What made her realize, hey, I'd rather be a Joe than a Cobra if this is the situation we're going to be involved in? What was the decision? And again, I don't know, and I'm sure a lot of people don't know yet, because there's so much, out there. There's so much, content, if you will, out there, comic book wise, to try to catch you up. And this is why, like I said, I'm going to try to buy those not the volume books, not the trade paperback books, for the comics, the volume 1, the volume 2s and all that. But I'm going to try to get the book ones, the big ones they've been advertising lately, to where, you basically get everything, not just, the main series itself, but the side series, the ones that lead up to it. So by reading those, hopefully and I'm sure others that are thinking about that, as well, will be caught up to speed. We'll be caught up to speed as to what's going on. As to why the Baroness is now a Joe. But again, some people, even upon hearing this, even though they don't know how this came about, still feel that this could be a ruse in story. That this is not, all as it seems. That this could be just another plot by Cobra, to have the Baroness as a double agent. But again, the writers basically said he wanted something different. He wanted to go a different route. He wanted to try something, different. And some of these writers, for these books, Transformers, G.I. Joe, Void Rivals, and who knows who else they'll bring into the Energon universe. These writers, they grew up, obviously as fans, as diehard fans of the franchise. Not just, the later incarnations, but mostly like with the 80s, 80s, early 90s representation of these characters, the G1s or the G1.2 characters, if you know what I mean, or the G2 characters, if you know what I mean. That's who they grew up on. That's who they grew up on and everything. And they're taking elements, bits and pieces of the G1, of the G2, and other elements from other incarnations of G.I. Joe and Transformers and whatever they can incorporate into Void Rivals. They're basically mixing it all together in this melting pot to essentially give fans like me and you something that's going to keep us coming back time after time after time. And I really appreciate that. I really do. I really appreciate, them doing that, because, it's something that, it's something that obviously you don't see a lot of licensed comic books or licensed web comics or whatever, licensed shows, web shows, movies. You don't see them doing that much. You don't see them doing that much, if at all. I mean, IDW Sonic, obviously fans want them to bring in the Freedom Fighters in some incarnation. How they do it, is going to be totally up to how Ian Flynn and his writing team, and Ian Flynn and the team at Sega Sonic, the Team Sonic that he consults with. It's going to be up to all of them to decide, okay, we finally want to bring these characters in, but how do we bring them into where, yeah, they might look a little different, but it's them, but it's, but it is, their character. It's the character fans remember, but again, they have a different, they got a slight different design, maybe a slight different personality, but it's them. It's, it's the bunny rabbits, it's the Sally Acorns, the Antrons, the Rotors, But basically, that's what they got to think of. They got to think of, like, how are they going to incorporate that when the time is right? And that's what you see here when it comes to the Skybound comics, the Energon universe. It's like, basically, they're taking all these different elements from all these different incarnations of Transformers, G.I. Joe, and whatever Void Rivals was, and they're basically saying, let's put it all together in this melting pot and see what works. And kind of mix it up a little bit, kind of change it up a little bit. I mean, I read Transformers, book 1, volume 1, I should say, Transformers volume 1. And, and even Linkara, reviewed. He reviewed the first couple of issues, that volume. And even Linkara was impressed by the quality of the book, the amalgamation. That's the word I'm looking for. The amalgamation of everything, everything of the Transformers lore and franchise throughout the years being mixed together, but how things were changed, how things went in a different direction. Because, a little bit of spoiler in case you haven't read it, Sparkplug, basically to save Prime, and an extent to save his son, Spike, basically sacrifices himself by merging and becoming one with the Matrix. And here's the thing. Never once in any G1 representation or G1 retelling or any other Transformer comics that have brought in elements of G1, the spark plugs, and the spikes and the Carlys and all that. Not once, did they ever have Sparkplug decide he's going to sacrifice himself and merge with the Matrix and become basically the new heart and soul of Optimus Prime, basically merge himself with Prime. Never once did that ever happen. Never once. And it's like you see that moment, and you're like, wow, that's a different change. That's a different take. I never saw that coming. Nor did we see how they began, the story, the origin. Like, instead of just going through what we've normally seen before with a different twist, them crashing on Earth and everything, you have them already crashed on Earth. You have them already kind of in stasis, stasis lock and everything, except for a few, like Jetfire and everything, who basically, because of him doing what he did, reactivated some of the Transformers like Starscream. And guess what? We don't see Megatron until way later on in the series. Or not way later on, but we don't see him in his situation until about a few issues into the series. We get a glimpse of it, I think in the first 2 issues of what happened. We don't see him fully, full on and all that until like a few issues in, or several issues in. It's a familiar take, but it's a different take. It's a familiar take, but it's a different take, and it's just making these comics, something that people want to just look at and continue to look at and want to find out, okay, what are they going to do next? What unexpected twist are they going to do next? And this Baroness becoming a Joe is one of those unexpected twists. Now, again, I know I'm repeating myself, but people, even though they're just finding out about it, they still have to read up on it to see exactly what happened, because there are people like myself that have to do that. There are those that even if they haven't read up on it yet, they look at that and they're like, there is no way this is legit. There is no way she's gone good. She still has to be bad. She still has to be a Cobra in disguise. But again, the writer behind it, in his own way, unless he's basically working people, which is a word used in all kinds of entertainment and media, working people, fooling people, unless he's basically pulling the wool over everybody's eyes. The writer, one of the main writers of the book, said, no, this is legit. She is a Joe now. Like, she's still the Baroness and everything. She's still kind of, the ruthless individual she is, but she's a Joe. Like, basically, again, as I said earlier, with whatever's going on and everything, with whatever's going on, like whoever, like Cobra aligned themselves with, or whatever Cobra commanders got planned and Destro's got planned, it basically led to her saying, I'm out. I'd rather be a Joe than a Cobra. And you know what's funny? Again, I mentioned earlier that some of the writers have to be longtime fans. You can't tell me they did not watch that one 2-part episode in G.I. Joe where the Joes went into an alternate universe where a lot of them were dead. And oh, by the way, the Baroness in that universe was good. And a Joe that went back into that universe decided to stay with her to try to fix what happened to that universe. You can't tell me that maybe the writers, or at least the head writer of the book, the main guy that says, hey, this is all legit, this is all on the up and up, you can't tell me that he didn't look at that episode maybe for inspiration. You can't tell me he didn't, because he did. And I think he also looked at other things for inspiration as well. I think he looked at, let's say, Marvel's X-Men. Marvel's X-Men, believe it or not, on several occasions had not only Emma Frost, but Mystique as part of the X-Men team. 2 villainesses that nobody thought would ever be part of the team were part of the team. In fact, they were also in leadership roles, I think, or something like that. There's a lot of examples out there, that they may have taken inspiration from to make this happen. And whether you believe it's a ruse or it's not, that's up to you. But according to him, and again, like I said, unless he's working everybody, he's pulling the wool over everybody's head. This, to him, basically in his own words, according to what I've heard, is legit. That the Baroness is, all red, white, and blue for now. It doesn't mean that when it's all said and done, that, she'll go back to Cobra. No. Here's what I think could happen. If her time as a Joe is limited, and again, the writer says this is on the up and up, then I could see her becoming basically what is known as an assassin for hire, or a bounty hunter. I could see her being that. I could see her being maybe an assassin for hire, but, an assassin for hire that assassinates those that need to be, the evil duo, the dictators, the evil duos, easy for me to say, hold on. The evil doers, sorry, like I said, I'm tired, the evil doers, the dictators, the people that, basically belittle and hurt innocent people and families for no reason. She could be made into that kind of an assassin. Like, yeah, hire me to take out this guy, and I'll take him out for this price. Or, hey, I've seen how ruthless this person's acting. You don't have to worry about paying me. I'll do it for free. They can make her like that. They can make her like a bounty hunter. Basically someone that gets paid to do a job, and even do a job a certain way. Like, hey, take this person out, but don't do anything else to them. Don't do anything you'll regret. She could be that. She could end up being that if her time as a Joe is limited. If it's limited. But again, it's an interesting take. It is an interesting take. And again, it shows you basically that the people behind the Energon universe at Skybound, they're taking elements of all different lores and incarnations of these Hasbro properties, and they're mixing them up, but they're also adding a little bit of a twist here and there. And I think the other reason, too, is not that this writer wanted to make the Baroness a Joe, wasn't just because maybe he saw, excuse me there, like I said, I'm tired. It's not just because maybe he saw, that episode, that two-part episode that I mentioned, where on the other side, on the other world, the alternate world, Baroness is good. Not only did maybe the writer see that episode, and then not only did he probably take inspiration from seeing what Marvel, and DC did by taking certain, potential former villainesses and turning them good and putting them on the good guy squads. I think in a way, the reason he made her a Joe is not just because of all that, but because it's something that we as kids that grew up playing with the action figures, role-playing as the characters, with the action figures, and everything, I think it's something that he himself growing up wanted to see. That they wanted to see the Baroness turn good, because why have an attractive fictional character like her be on the side of bad? Yeah, she could be the femme fatale for them. Why have her on the side of bad and not good? So to me, I think that's one of the reasons, maybe, along with everything else I've mentioned, that he went this route. Like, yeah, he started her off as a bad, a bad girl, but had her basically change sides, because I guess to him it makes more sense to have a femme fatale, basically, put her, priorities first. The priorities basically being her survival, the world's survival, the U.S.'s survival, her country, where she's from, like Europe, basically her, her home country survival. Again, like I said, I'm tired, I do apologize. Basically she wants to prioritize that before anything else. And if what she saw and heard is, not in basically the same, discussion, the same atmosphere, as what, as to what she wants, or as to what she prioritizes, then she wants nothing to do with it, at all. Now, one question obviously people would have is, wait a minute, she has a relationship with Destro, right? Well, again, it all depends on the incarnation of the character. In the G1 animated series, she did have a relationship. But when they did the sequel series by DIC Entertainment, DIC, that relationship went kaput, and Destro ended up with Zarana. Or at least, that's what we know. I gotta go back and rewatch the series. The point I'm getting at is this. The Baroness, in all the different incarnations, from G.I.JOE, Real American Hero G1, the DIC sequel series to the '87 movie, to Renegades, to Resolute, to Sigma 6, to G.I. Joe Extreme, I'm assuming, to an extent, every version of the Baroness was always bad. She was always bad, but there were exceptions where she did go good, basically because, again, the situation would call for it. And here, this is one of those situations to where in story, it did call for it, but called for it in a way that, again, nobody expected would happen. Her becoming a Joe. And like I said, whether this is limited or not, or the writer is saying what he's saying because he wants to pull the wool over everybody's eyes, whatever the case might be, you can't say that this is not a major shakeup. This is just not, hold on for a second here. Sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied. Like I said, I'm tired. I do apologize. But like I said, you cannot say for a moment that this is not a major shakeup, because it is. It is a major shakeup. It's a shakeup that, again, some people, when they were role-play with their Joe figures, wanted to see happen, but they never thought would. And yet, here we are. yet here we are. So again, it's just, I'll admit, it's just kind of crazy to even think this. And again, I believe this will happen. If what the head writer behind the change on Baroness going to be in a Joe is true, if what he said is true, then again, I do believe one of two things will happen. Her time will be limited, but she will not go back to Cobra. She'll leave the Joes, but she'll become one of two things. Like I said, she'll become an assassin for hire that assassinates the evil doers, the dictators, the people that basically, I guess you could say crush the innocence and, of people and families beneath their feet. I believe she'll be that kind of an assassin for hire. Even one that says, hey, you don't have to pay me. You could just hire me because I've seen what this individual does. I'll take him out for free. Or she could be a bounty hunter to where she gets paid, to do certain tasks, even if it maybe goes against, her beliefs or whatever. Or maybe, she's told, yeah, here's the money, do this job, but hey, there are certain restrictions you cannot do. So she might be an honorable bounty hunter. We don't know. But I believe one of those two things will happen if what the writer is saying is true. Because if he's working and pulling the wool over everybody's eyes, more power to him. And more power to him, because we've never seen a double agent Baroness. But it doesn't look like that's the case. It doesn't look like that's the case and all that, especially with the recent issues. But we'll see what happens. I mean, obviously in continuity, again, I haven't read the books yet, but obviously there is still trust issues. But I guess there's enough trust based on what's going on in the overall Energon universe. There's enough trust to whether, look, we may not trust you fully because of your background, because of who you are part of and all that. We may not trust you fully yet, but we trust you enough to get the job done. So that might be the issue there. I don't know. Again, I have to read up on the book, see what's going on. But yeah, it is quite, like I said, it is quite the shakeup in the status quo. But again, like I said, Skybound has been known to do that. Again, you take a look at what, they did with the spark plug situation, in Transformers and how they started that off. You take a look at the situation with Optimus and Elita 1 there, and what's been going on lately. It's like you cannot tell me for one instant. You cannot tell me for one instant that they don't know what they're doing when it comes to basically getting people's attention, especially long-time fans. Because they do know what they're doing. Being fans themselves for a long time, they realize that if they shake things up and do things that are unexpected, it's going to get people's attention. And it's going to get people invested, into seeing what's going on, even by word of mouth. Even if they haven't read the book yet, it's going to make them want to read it. By word of mouth. But anyway, though, guys, let me know what your thoughts are on the Baroness. For now almost a year of publication and in story, for about a year or so, being a good girl, maybe with trust issues, a femme fatale good girl with the Joes, a femme fatale G.I. Joe. Let me know what your thoughts are on that. Is it something you've been wanting to see yourself growing up with G.I. Joe back in the day, even when you played with your figures? Did you feel it's something that could have happened even in the animated series or any other comic adaptations, or interpretations? Let me know. Let me know what your thoughts are overall on that. And do you believe whether or not this might be a ruse by the writer to make us think this is all legit, like he says, to only surprise us with, hey, she's a double agent, she's still part of Cobra. Do you think that might be the indication, or that we see happen? Not indication, but you think that might be the situation, the moment we see happening in the future? Or do you think this is all on the up and up? and that maybe her time with the Joes is just a limited time, do you think maybe she might, as I mentioned earlier, go on to be like an assassin for good, to go after the evil doers, dictators and all that hurt the innocent, for a price and maybe even for free, depending on who she's after? Or do you think she might be a bounty hunter, that does a job, for a price, whether it's a job that goes against her beliefs or it's a job that basically is with limitations, like do this but don't do that? What do you think her future will be after, maybe if it's a limited time, moment with the Joes? Let me know what your thoughts are on that. But also, like I said, overall, guys, let me know what your thoughts are on her being on the G.I. Joe side of things. What do you think? If you want to spoil, go ahead. I'll give you that permission. Spoil away. What do you think was the reason she went to the Joes from Cobra? What made her go that route? Was it an alliance with the Decepticons? Was it something that was even something even beyond her, her standards? Like, hey, I'm willing to do this, but I'm not willing to do that. That's crossing the line. Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts and everything overall. And yeah, that's about it, guys. So until next time, comment down below, like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel. Also, click on the links in the description to find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube, as well as click on the last link in the description to go to my Teespring store for merchandise you can't get anywhere else. And again, guys, I do apologize if I was all over the place. I am tired. It's been a long day. I did work. It's hot too. Basically we woke up to thunderstorms unexpectedly this morning, and all that. Thunderstorms, rain, and all that this morning. Kind of woke up to that unexpectedly. So, yeah. Anyway, though, guys, I just wanted to come on here and talk about this. Give me your thoughts overall. What do you think is going to what do you think is going to be the outcome out of all this when it's all said and done? Do you think, again, this is a legit thing? Do you think it's a, not a legit thing? It's like it's a ruse, or, we're being worked and everything? Let me know. Or do you think it is a legit thing and maybe her time is limited? Do you think if it's limited, she's going to go one of the ways I mentioned? Or do you think she'll stay with Joe? Let me know what your thoughts are. And again, giving you permission, go ahead and spoil in the comments if you like. What do you think, what led to this situation, to her turning? And if you don't want spoilers, don't look at the comments. But also, let me know what your thoughts were on, if you haven't read the books yet. Again, don't look at the comments yet. Don't look at the comments. But let me know what your thoughts are on basically what you believe could have led her to change sides. But anyway, though, guys, like I said, that's about all I'm going to say. And again, I do apologize if I was all over the place. I am tired. It's been a long day. And until next time, guys, I will talk to you all later. And until then, God bless. Take care. But give me your thoughts. Love to hear them.